Good morning, class, or good day, and welcome to Digital Media Convergence, Lesson 9. This is a two-part lesson, so in this lesson we'll be covering the first part of Digital Media Convergence, focusing in radio. So just a quick recap of Lesson 8. We contextualize television convergence to all three stages of production, distribution, and consumption of content. We investigated and discussed changes in distribution of television content with the rise of digital convergence. This obviously with regards to things such as Netflix, Disney+, etc. And then we investigated and discussed changes in consuming of television content with the rise of digital convergence. So again, referring to the Disney+, etc., but with the focus more on audience. Okay, so a quick recap question for Lesson 8. Point out a few key factors that you can recall making specific reference to how media convergence changed journalism and newsrooms. So of course we went over journalism in the previous lessons and how that has changed, and then obviously focusing on television and consumption, how we consume things that were traditionally put onto television. That can be related from newsrooms to television reporting, etc. Alright, the objectives for Lesson 9 is to develop a critical understanding of digital media convergence and how it affects the radio industry. And then we're going to look at developing a critical understanding of the changes in the radio industry caused by advancements in digital convergence technologies and how it influences roles and responsibilities. So how is radio consumed nowadays? With radio listeners having access to an increasing amount of content and platforms to consume content such as news, sports, etc., this leads to an increased amount of new consumers and audience who are non-traditional, meaning they don't listen to the radio traditionally. They're non-passive because you're now able to interact with the content and the broadcasters. They're participative, meaning that they participate in quizzes, questionnaires, ratings, they contribute to the content, and then they're independent thinkers and they're also independent consumers. This is because they are able to access information in multiple ways and also to an extent fact check information that is posted. So they are independent thinkers in that manner. So continuing on with that, the new media environment changes the radio industry, forcing them to diversify and improve their platforms towards multimedia content and distribution. So we can see this in radio stations such as Jacaranda, 5FM, etc., who now have websites and apps and different media platforms aside from their traditional broadcasting on the radio. This is done to complement the radio broadcaster and not to replace them. So they are diversifying to reach a broader audience, but they aren't removing their primary source of communication, which is radio. So moving into the radio industry, corporate media is directed towards marketing, information distribution, and selling audience attention with the use of inserted adverts. These can be products or services. So of course, corporate media is still looking to sell items to their audience or sell the space on their radio station itself. And then radio forms part of this as it includes economic, industrial outputs, aesthetic production, and social influence. So this is very important with regards to marketing specifically and consumption of information or content that can somehow influence you as a consumer or what it is that you will consume in future, as it does influence us socially, politically, economically, and industrially. And then it's viewed as a cultural industry due to this interconnectedness. So of course, they have a loyal audience or anything like that, and it becomes cultural not only in the fact that you relate to one another because you enjoy the same content and that forms part of a discussion, but also because it is a cultural industry, because it also influences us culturally with regards to discussion topics, norms, etc. So continuing on with the radio industry, the consumption culture is connected to radio as content consumed produces cultural experiences and interactions. So again, this can be with regards to taking part in a quest that the radio station has maybe set out for their audience, or participating in discussion and also having discussions about things that have been shared on that specific station. Radio is currently looking to become more web-based and multimedia orientated to engage audience. So of course, again, emphasizing the fact that majority of radio stations now have a website or an app or social media pages that you can then engage with. And it also allows you to download discussions or to view their playlists, etc., so that you can get the names and things like that and not really miss out on content because you weren't with a radio at the time. So this is framed in a set of 3 elements. There's coverage, which is the spectrum distribution. And then there's branding, which depends on the content that it is that you're broadcasting. So if you're specifically a house music broadcast or something like that, your branding will revolve around house music, and that is obviously the content that you're putting out. And then your content itself is defined by coverage. So who it is that listens to your station, etc. You won't necessarily have a radio station that is broadcasting house music to an area that is traditionally drawn to country music, let's put it like that. Obviously, that is seen as an overgeneralization, but it is still relevant today. You want to anticipate your audience's needs and cater to them in order to be successful. So what has given rise to the new listeners? So obviously, new listeners is the younger generations and the manner in which people are now consuming radio. So although terrestrial broadcasting is still common, stats show that online broadcasting no longer complements FM, but will soon replace FM listening. So this is due to immigrants and the youth. So of course, you're South African and you immigrated, but you are, let's say, extremely loyal to radio stations such as 5FM. You can then still listen to them online whilst being in a different country, in a different time zone. And also with regards to the youth, we are extremely technologically orientated, and we like to make use of our cell phones, tablets, and laptops to engage with content and listen to content. So for now, it's seen as a complementary item, but they do predict that it will eventually replace FM listening with specifically immigrants and youth. I wouldn't go so far as to say that it will forever replace it, especially here in South Africa if we look at issues such as cost of data and also accessibility to things like smartphones, etc. So with television popularity increasing, radio programming strategies have adjusted. The internet reaches around the world and allows for audience to become interactive with content and broadcasting. So again, that's quite self-explanatory. Obviously, with television rising and the way that we consume it, radio is following form in that they're also moving online, just as a lot of series and movies have with Netflix and things like that. We did discuss that last week, and it's quite interesting to see how the different mediums are following form onto one another. And then obviously the internet reaches around the world, so you have an opportunity to have a larger audience who aren't restricted to their geographical location, in that they don't need to be within an area to pick up the frequency of your radio station. They can access it from anywhere in the world. Then continuing on with that, streaming has thus become crucial for broadcasters' online development. And that's extremely important, again, because for now it is complementing them, but in future they do predict that it will replace FM listening. So radio that is now available in both digital and analog are catering to audiences' needs, their use and routine with media. So participative radio, this is something that's not necessarily new, but it's become increasingly popular in the last decade or so, with obviously social media and smartphones and having access to websites, etc. So the focus on interactivity and participation is again convergence and then cloud computing. So convergence is, for example, streaming the radio on your laptop or your cell phone. And then cloud computing is when things are stored onto a cloud, a database, and you're able to download it. That can also be more specific to things such as podcasts. So interaction focus is mainly on social, cultural, and organizational issues that provide content for interaction. Okay, that's quite self-explanatory. They'll discuss the social, cultural, and organizational issues that were discussed on the program, and that'll then be discussed in the comments, etc. And they'll interact with that, whether they agree, disagree, or they want to add valuable content. And this introduces computer interfaces, allowing the audience a simple and familiar way to access media. So if you go onto radio stations, websites such as, again, 5FM, just as an example, you'll see that it is quite a simple website. It is very familiar to what we are used to with any other company or products that we're consuming or researching with regards to menu, layout, etc. It's very familiar to us, so it is a welcoming environment. So the 3 factors of interactive communication. The first one is that it is multi-way. This means that it involves 2 or more actors. So of course you have the presenter, who's actor 1, and then actor 2 can either be a co-host or co-presenter. And then when they say more actors, they mean the consumers who are interacting with the content. And then it is immediate. So responses occur within seconds. So let's say, for example, you're having a show on 5FM, and they have a WhatsApp line, or they follow the tweets that are discussing what it is that they're discussing, and you're able to immediately comment and consume the content. Even with downloads or anything like that, the moment that you want to comment or interact with it, you are able to do so. So it's very immediate. And then it is contingent. This responses from one actor follow direct and logically from the actions of another. So this could also just refer to basically the structure of the comments, in that you scroll up and there's the main topic that's discussed, the comments, and then obviously if you click on view comments, under certain comments, etc., you're able to see that. So it flows in a very logical and familiar manner to us, such as with social medias on Instagram or Facebook. It's a similar structure. So moving on, using multiple platforms and device mediums allows radio to establish different types of interaction with audience. This depends on 2 factors. One is the design of the interface, creating ease, and 2 is the computer literacy of the radio listener. So, of course, if you're able to access a computer and you know more or less how to work it, it's quite simple to interact with the interfaces of these radio stations. But of course, the first step is to be literate with computers, which does create a barrier here in SA, obviously, with literacy issues, and of course with having access and the ability to learn computer literacy. So how can you interact with broadcasters? So these are just some of the general ways that you can already interact with broadcasters. You can do so on posts, you can tweet, you can email them, you can call into the station. They have blog comments, social media networks where you can tag them or discuss directly on their page, and then community activities that are set up by the broadcasters. So that is obviously offline, whereas these are all online. The offline ones are usually fundraisers, etc., or concerts or anything like that, where you have the opportunity to personally interact with them and express, anything that you'd like. Okay, so short class discussion is obviously the curiosity of how you as a young generation, who are obviously quite involved with technology, considering your area of studies, how it is that you consume radio content. Do you still listen to traditional radio at home and in the car? Are you a mixture between new and traditional, meaning that you'll stream it at home on your laptop, but if you're in the car, you listen to it on the radio, etc.? Or are you what is a new term, an e-listener, which is something that we will be covering next. So the e-listeners are quite a new term, and it's definitely come up with this generation of downloading and streaming. So radio content is now produced and accessed online via streaming, downloading, and podcasts, giving the listener a variety in how they choose to consume content and on which platform. So again, you can download podcasts from Apple Music or from Spotify. So there's obviously different platforms. How you'd like to consume it is different, whether you want to listen to the live streaming of it, you want to download it and listen to it on your phone or on your laptop, etc. That's all now options for us as consumers. So combining different approaches such as FM, streaming, podcast, visual aids, and audio aids. So this is quite interesting. You can still have your brand on the radio. You can then stream it online for people to access it from your website. You can make it downloadable. There's visuals included on it in that you can film interviews, or you can film your session and post it onto YouTube or onto your site. And then, of course, audio aids, which is listening to the broadcast. So immersion, involvement, and routine of content consumption is increasing in our daily lives. So looking at immersion, firstly, that is not only the way that we consume it, but it's also the way that we live our lives. Our lives are becoming increasingly immersed into social media, just as social media is becoming increasingly immersed into our real life. And then involvement is our contribution, whether it is that we're interacting with someone else's post, we're creating our own content and posting it, or you like to comment on things, anything along those lines. And then routine of content. This can also be looked at in a manner of, if you leave leave home for work at 7 o'clock every morning, the news will be on, so you consume your news at that time, and then maybe during your lunch break you scroll through social media, or you want to listen to podcasts and things like that. We've started to create a routine in checking digital media and content, and it's definitely becoming involved in our lives. So this is all leading to convergence culture. All right, so looking at the term convergence culture, this is the idea of life lived within media/radio. So again, it's that immersion idea, the involvement in routine. It's becoming more involved in our lives, just as we are becoming more involved in it. So radio shows spread over multiple platforms, which is consumed in personal media and consumed in a common sense, not only allowing for information sharing, but by allowing consumers to consume the content and help make sense of their lives. This can range from anything with regards to traffic reports, for example, silly example, but I do think that it's relevant. You hear it on the news, and you can then know that you need to avoid a certain route, or if the petrol's going up, you can hear that on the news and on media, and then you'll go fill up your car before 12 o'clock at night, and multiple things like that. And then obviously also just making sense of our lives. If there's a broadcast that maybe discusses something about depression, and you know someone that suffers with depression, it allows you to create context within your life. So radio is an everyday companion, helping structure our routines. Like, for example, again, the breakfast drive. On your way to work, you listen to their news, you listen to their general structure of their show, and it supplies day-to-day information on sport, news, weather, and entertainment. So that's all quite self-explanatory. So it allows audience to take part in virtual communication and interaction. So virtual obviously means online, or call in or anything like that. You don't need to be physically present, and you're still able to communicate and interact with them even though you are not physically there. So continuing on with that, by moving into multiple platforms, social media allows audience to not only consume the content, but to create and distribute content. So again, we are able to consume content in multiple ways, but we are also able to produce it. If you have an Instagram account, Facebook account, TikTok, Twitter, etc., and you are somewhat active on there in that you post things or whatever, you are creating content and you are choosing in which manner you'd like to distribute it, whether it will be on Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, or Snapchat, or anything like that. And then e-listeners are both FM and online listeners. So it's important, the important fact of being an e-listener, they combine radio and other platforms of audio media in multiple platforms to settle their own audio media digest. Okay, so let's say, for example, you like to consume the news on FM. So in the morning, you get into your car, you listen to the news, but then you like to listen to your own music, so you stream your music on Spotify. And then when you're looking for deeper discussions into maybe starting a business, things like that, you could then go onto a business podcast, etc. So you're using multiple platforms, and you're also consuming audio content in various ways. So they relate to brands and are concerned about the content distributed. So again, these people, e-listeners, again, are the youth, and we are quite orientated around brand loyalty, etc. So we do want to support brands, and we find loyalty within them, and we are of course concerned with the content that is distributed, and that's why majority of us, you'll read an article, you then maybe go to a different distributor and you go check their article. It's almost like fact checking on our own, but also it comes down to preference of information. If you enjoy hearing about politics and business and things like that, you'll listen to a program such as 702. If you enjoy pop culture and music, maybe you'll move over to 5FM, that kind of thing. And if you're more orientated around social events with regards to charitable events or anything like that, you could maybe move over to Jacaranda. So this displays interactive behaviors. So of course they are interactive on the sites that they consume. So convergence led to radio. So just note that it's not normal radio. It's got that little @ sign, which we can obviously assume is online. All right. So cloud computing convergence plus interactivity has equaled a new approach to radio. Radio today is multi-platform, multimedia, and convergent. It is, and here's just a few characteristics of it. It's sound and image, it's interactive, it's participatory, shareable, repeatable, consumable, and on demand. So shareable, you can share the link for it. Repeatable, meaning you can download it or rewind it and listen to it multiple times. Customizable, meaning that you don't have to listen to the adverts, or you don't have to listen to the music or news segments or anything like that. And then on demand, you get to choose when and where you are listening to it. So continuing on with the radio with the @ sign, continuing on with that content, broadcasters must now relate to web/online users through tools providers. So again, that's referring to getting complementary sites or moving to being a digital broadcaster. And this may soon move into cognitive radio. So cognitive radio is quite a foreign concept, and it's not necessarily common in practice right now, but it is a form of transceiver which automatically detects and adjusts a newly available channels. So it's a way of exploring things, but it's not really in play at this time. Okay, so multimedia platform, what does this mean for the practitioner? So of course you are all working, studying media, and you'll soon be working in media. So what does it mean for you once radios move on to multimedia? So radio is both a medium and a business, leading to the creation of branding within the radio industry. So again, there's a brand. It's dependent on your content and who is consuming your content. And of course, just like anything, it's a business, meaning that they sell their radio space, they are selling marketing, they are selling you on something or consumption or anything like that. And this is of importance as radio begins to diversify and branch out into multiple platforms of media. So this is quite important. I would say take note of the idea of branching out into multiple platforms of media by diversifying. It is no longer enough to be the most popular radio station on the air. It's now important to become somewhat popular online or on social media and things like that, to diversify across multimedia platforms instead of just capitalizing on one. So you want to expand horizontally and not vertically. All right. So these convergences are not driven by new technologies, but are viewed as an addition to the broadcaster's brand identity. So again, the internet has been there for years. Radio has been there for years. Radio has had the opportunity since the internet started to converge with them. So it's not convergence due to new technologies. It's not that they're only now able to do so. It is now that there's a demand to do so due to the way that we are looking to consume our content. So radio now operates as media brands across a range of platforms. Okay, so it's no longer the radio station 5FM, it's just 5FM. They have social media platforms, they have obviously their broadcasting, they have a website, etc. So they are creating a brand. And then focus on brand identity at an organizational level is the central feature of a commercial rationale for convergence. So when they say commercial rationale, they mean why is it that we are doing this? Why do we feel the need to do this? And the reason being is because you need to cater to audience. And they are doing this by creating a brand identity across the multiple media platforms. Okay, so that is their rationale. Why? So continuing on with that, so that's obviously at an organizational level, and now we're going to look at a worker level. So radio employees specialize in commercial operation of radio organizations such as sales, promotion, and marketing, whereas traditionally it wasn't always emphasized. You could just be a presenter who was good at discussing topics, or let's say you work on 702, you're extremely business and politically orientated, you enjoy that. But now, obviously, with it becoming a business and it still needs to be marketable, they are always looking at how are they selling themselves as a brand, not only how is their content. Okay, so their content could be great, but if they aren't selling themselves as a brand, focusing on things such as sales, promotion, and marketing, they won't necessarily be successful, and that's why that's very important. So response to the changing expectations of commercial advertising. Okay. So majority of us don't really enjoy advertising, etc. But people who now work at radio stations need to be able to respond and integrate with new advertising and commercial advertising and how it is that it's changing that we want to consumer advertising. So radio requires its own marketing to compete with other platforms and perform as a traditional tool for branded marketing. Okay. So when they say they need their own marketing, again, they're treating themselves as a brand, just like any clothing brand or anything like that. So they do focus on not only their own marketing, they also focus on having other companies market their brands or services on their platform. So it's a very good balance, and the more that they are able to brand themselves and the more widespread they are, the more exposure the companies that are buying airtime on their shows, the more exposure they will get too. Okay, so the roles and responsibilities in the radio landscape. So staff is increasingly tasked with marketing and promotion. I've just explained the importance of that. So if you do want to move into radio, just bear that in mind. You won't necessarily just be speaking on the radio. You also need to ensure that you are capable at marketing and promoting not only the radio station, but also maybe brands that are buying airtime or anything like that. And then growth of specialized staff responsible for the production and organization of each brand's online presence. So again, when they say specialized staff, it means that that's what you've studied, that is your profession, etc. That is becoming increasingly important for people who work at radio stations. And then online editors are responsible for managing the content of websites, repurposing audio, supplementary text-based content, images, and videos, and the management of promotional and branded activities, coordinating with social media. So online editors need to manage a lot more content than previously before because it is now cross-media. So they need to ensure that it's on the radio, they need to ensure that it's made into a podcast, they need to make sure that it's on the website, etc., etc. There's a lot more platforms that they now need to tend to instead of just radio. All right, and then workers are responsible for network websites and online content whilst helping radio staff adapt to new platforms and practices. That's also very important for the new generation that's entering into the radio station industry. Right, so continuing on with that, there's a department named Interactive. It's a general term for that department. Whether or not that's the name with every radio station, I can't tell you. So these are online editors who are working with music brands, and they respond to content ideas and actively work with the on-air announcers. Okay, so that's to put up music, find music, etc. Let's say they're doing on-demand music requests, something like that. All right, and then here's a little case study. I want to encourage you to please watch it, and then you need to make note of what convergence was used during the case study. Right, then a short little next lesson teaser. We're going to contextualize radio convergence in South African context and understand and discuss the podcasting landscape in South Africa using supporting stats and figures of radio stations using podcasts. So that will be quite interesting to see. Obviously, we've looked at radio specifically. Now we're going to look at podcasts, which has come from radio, obviously, radio being almost like the original. And then here are the resources that I've used throughout this lesson. You guys can refer to if you'd like to do some further reading, and the pages that I have used specifically are listed. Thank you very much. Enjoy the rest of your day.